Thank you so much for agreeing to answer some quick questions. The first semi-unscripted question I have for both of you is to tell us who you are. So if you can give us your names and titles so that people around the state can know. We'll start with you, Mike.
My name is Michael Pruitt, and I am currently serving as the elected Johnson County Coroner.
And I am Derek Wilson. I am the Chief Deputy Coroner of Johnson County.
Thank you. And then you both also, if it's allowed, can have multiple other roles in the county. Can you speak to those two real quick?
Yeah, I'm the Deputy Fire Chief of the Barkersville Fire Department. Been in the fire service, the firefighter paramedic for just under 40 years.
And I am a career firefighter at the Indianapolis Airport Authority Fire Department. That's what I do full time.
And then to finish off our introductions, I'm Kathleen with Upstream Prevention. And we are the nonprofit in Johnson County that houses the Suicide Prevention Coalition and our LOSS team. And while I think most people should know, but for those who don't, LOSS stands for Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors. And it's a volunteer-based team that provides support to individuals who have lost a loved one to suicide. And in Johnson County, we call our team ATLAS, which stands for Assisting Through Loss After Suicide, because it's a little bit more upbeat than calling it a loss team. So ATLAS is what Indiana considers an active scene-based response team, which means we work closely with these two to make sure that we are able to send a team out to provide support to survivors immediately and on scene. And so that's my first question for either of you. How and when do you determine to activate the loss team or ATLAS?
So I'll just start out, and then Derek can jump in with anything he wants to. Anytime we respond on a call for a suicide in the coroner's office, we activate our ATLAS team. And once we make contact with them, they verify that they have a team available to respond to us, which majority of the time they do. And then they respond and meet either us or law enforcement at the scene, but they respond directly. And so if there's any circumstance on the scene that we feel like that it's just not going to be a good situation for them to come to, then we call them back and we work that out, and maybe it's a later follow-up with the family.
Do you have anything to add, Derek?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. We've also had a couple situations where ATLAS has specifically been requested by law enforcement or chaplains on the scene, where maybe the event happened in our county, but the person was transported to another county and passed away there. So that's another instance that we've run into before too. So it's been working great.
Yeah, and I can think of one instance where Kathleen was getting phone calls from the chaplains who were there and saying, how do we activate ATLAS? And I was like, it's okay. Like, the coroner's office is on it. So I think just that recognition of support has always been great. One thing I do want to kind of emphasize that, Mike, you basically said is anytime you have a death that you think is, my computer is updating. Anytime you have a death that is a suspected or probable suicide, you all call us out. Because I know sometimes there have been, through that death investigation, it's been ruled accidental or, change that cause of death. But I think that the key piece there is anytime you think it might be, which is really great on our end, because we would rather be called out and not need it or be able to provide some of that support for just having lost somebody, whether or not it was a suicide. And we've hinted at this, but my next question is, how has having ATLAS at the scene been beneficial to you all in the coroner's office?
So, when we call ATLAS to the scene, because I will be honest with you, there are none of us that are experts in dealing with the emotional impact that a suicide has on a family or friends even. Even being in public safety for as many years as I have, still tough to deal with those. It's always nice to have people that are totally focused on the fallout from this incident that's happened. They can stay focused on it. I mean, as a coroner, we have so many aspects that we're investigating and looking at. But sometimes the welfare of the family or friends is, I won't say it's overlooked, but it's not given the attention to detail. And so the nice thing about Atlas showing up on the scenes is we basically direct family and friends to them, and they handle that whole thing. So they're totally focused on the welfare of that family because, as we know, based on past history, that sometimes, following a suicide, the same thing can reoccur within a family and it can have a pattern. And so anything we can do to interrupt that or head that off, we do that. We're all in on this. I like to use every tool in the toolbox as a coroner in our county, and Atlas is one of those tools that when it came along, it was like a blessing to get them out there and work as a team to take care of these families on the death investigation front and also on their continuing welfare.
Yeah, we talk a lot about postvention as prevention, and this idea and the knowledge that individuals who have lost a loved one are at a higher risk themselves. And I know that that's something that coroner's offices don't always get to do a lot of prevention work because I think one of you talks about being the last responder. You're the ones that come in at the end. But anything we can do to interrupt that cycle, I'm all for it.
Our office from day one, when I came in, is we got super involved in the prevention side, whether it was suicide prevention, whether it was drug abuse, any of those. I felt we had a very important role to play in getting in. We didn't want customers. Okay, it's like working to put ourselves out of business. So, but also based on our experiences and our knowledge, we could go back and help the prevention side in heading some of this stuff off.
Yeah, and I think some of the things that I've seen that's helped our office, especially in our investigators, is, when we respond to these scenes, there's a lot taking place and a lot to deal with. Our Atlas volunteers can work with the family to allow our deputy coroners and our investigators to conduct our investigation and, be able to focus our efforts there at the time and where our efforts need to be focused. And then we can go back, this has just worked along beautifully with our chaplaincy we have here in Johnson County, our law enforcement. It just kind of fits together like a glove, and it really works out at these scenes. And it's offered our investigators a chance to do their job without necessarily being bothered by the outside things that are going on. And then we can come back and circle back around. And, 9 times out of 10, they have all the answers that we're looking for. They know what we're looking for. And, we're able to sit down as one big group and take care of that. And it wraps up nicely at the end.
Great. So this one, after singing all of those praises and also talking to me, may be harder. But I do want to know, because I'm always for continual improvement, and I know others, around the state are experiencing some barriers. But have you experienced some barriers in working with Atlas and getting those pieces together and in place?
So the first barriers is anything new that you inject into our scenes. Law enforcement is obviously very protective of everything they do. The coroner's office can be very protective of everything they do. And so allowing people from the outside who aren't public safety, or I like to think we're public safety, but we'll go back to the last responder thing, but to allow outside people to come in and be a part of our scenes is pretty tough for some people to digest. Okay, there's always the fear of messing up a crime scene or something, just interfering somehow. When we first started bringing Atlas out to our scenes, we had to explain to law enforcement, hey, this is what they're here for. We had to explain to our own people, hey, this is what they do. This is what they're used to. And so we went through that little transition where, that comfort zone for law enforcement, coroner's office, and Atlas was a little bumpy, but we knew it was going to be that way. But now when we show up on scenes, we often get the question, even law enforcement, is Atlas coming? And so that they can do a circle of trust, as I call it, when that occurs. And so that was the only thing that I saw in the beginning, but we expected that. We expected that. You saw people show up in purple shirts, and you're like, why are people in purple shirts showing up at my death scene? Now, when they see the purple shirts, they know who they are. They know how to allow them to engage with family or friends, whoever's on the scene, to start their work.
And I just want to echo what Mike said. And I think this will be a reoccurring barrier for other counties in the state of Indiana. You know, having an elected or a chief, you know, an administration that basically steps in and says, we are going to do this. But then on the back end, educating their law enforcement partners. This did not take long at all to put all that to bed. And honestly, you know, let's be honest here, a lot of our chaplains in our counties are volunteers, and, you know, it takes time to get them there. In the short of things, these folks step in and, you know, they're a great resource, especially on our suicide scenes that, you know, when we may not get a chaplain response. So, you know, just being able to step in there and saying, listen, we're going to do this. We're going to do this for the betterment of our families, the betterment of our communities. And then, you know, maybe dealing with the things as they come. It worked well for us. And like I said, there was no issues, you know, to speak of after this initially got rolling. And I mean, like Mike said before, personally, I've never experienced a situation in my family or been affected by, you know, suicide. So these people that are showing up, they can speak to that. They have been through this, and they might be able to provide better than anybody else there, including maybe a chaplain at these folks' time of need. So it's important.
Yeah, and I know one of the first, when we were very first getting started, I did get an email from you, Mike, of responses and concerns that somebody had shared with you on scene, and it was all very valid things. It was one of those where we were still training up new people and we were having them shadow, and so it was a bigger group that showed up than normal, and their concern of, you know, in this haze of grief and trauma and all the things that these survivors are going through, is somebody right there immediately worthwhile, and is it better the next day? And one of the things that I think we have done well, or at least tried to do well, is listen when you all bring those things up, but then also to make sure that the things we're doing have a reason. So there was a reason we had so many people at that specific scene, but we adjusted and we only sent one person out to shadow in the future. And we always try to be there immediately for that support and to hold space, but we do also follow up, you know, the next day or a couple days later to have that conversation once things have maybe settled a little bit. So like you said, we expected barriers, we expected challenges, but I'm happy to know that we've overcome them and are tackling them as they come. One of the similar things, or at least we've hinted at, is that sometimes it's not possible for Atlas to show up. So I know one of the earlier calls, there was a overnight call and we weren't able to get a team together. And so in situations like that where Atlas doesn't show up, or we've been unable to respond, when and what do you communicate with Atlas so that there is some level of connection afterwards?
So when we have those situations, which are very few, when this occurs, you know, we're back to what we used to do. You know, we have to think of who likes to work, which is very, you know, very understandable. We realize Atlas is a volunteer organization, and any volunteer organization, they have another life also. So when that occurs, you know, it's really not that big a deal for us. Especially if we can get Atlas to follow up the day after with the family. I mean, there's always that option there, but we've had very few cases where they haven't been able to come out to the scene. So if we know they're not coming, it's okay. We just take on a little bit extra workload, just like we always did before, and we get through it. We know that that's
Yeah, the one I'm thinking, I can only think of one. And like I said, it was one of those, it was in the middle of the night and our phones weren't on ring, honestly, is what it was. I woke up, our team woke up in the morning and saw all of the missed calls. We're like, oh, awesome, we missed that. But it was one of those where we were easily able to follow up, I think with Derek and the deputy that was there, coroner that was there, and get the information. And we dropped off resources on that individual's porch later that day. And so it was one of those where we had that connection and had that ability. And we felt bad that we didn't respond, but also knew that they were getting more support then, even with us not having been there, at the time, than they would have, 2 years ago.
Well, I had a call the other morning, 3:45 in the morning. And, without going into too much detail, you just have a decedent at the scene. And this person, had called in themselves, and then you get there and you don't have family there. So there has been situations where I've, spoke with, we first of all, we always let Atlas know when there is a call for a suicide. We text them, we're in communication with them, and that's typically conducted by either Mike or myself. And then we pass down the information. They give us an ETA of how long it's going to respond, take them to respond to the scene. Most of the time it's anywhere between 20 minutes and 45 minutes. But, there are a couple situations, in custody deaths at the jail. That's something that Atlas might not be able to be involved in, just because due to the location, and some of these other counties have, prisons and things like that. Those are going to be more along the lines of the follow-up later on. Maybe not an Atlas response to the scene, but, like I said, I had one the other morning that, the decedent was the only one there. We had an identified family, and, is that going to be a situation where it's going to be worthwhile for our Atlas volunteers to come out there and basically watch me do my job, and there's no family members around to be, to speak of. So in that situation, we just follow up with them and give them the information after the fact to the family. And then, they'll make the approach, or if I go and do a notification, we keep the Atlas folders with us, and we're able to provide those resources there later on down the road when we are able to notify families.
And then do you have any advice for coroners' offices around the state who are either considering working with a lost team like Atlas, or maybe have the opportunity to work with a lost team like Atlas? Anything you would tell them?
Fall, let down the wall. Okay, don't be afraid to bring this group into the circle of trust. I truly believe that any coroner's office that takes advantage of this program understands it, gets to know the people that are involved in it. They're going to see the benefits of this when the Atlas team arrives on the scene. And so to me, as an elected official, I have every responsibility in the world to that family, not only to determine, what happened, but also to make sure that they have access to the services so that we don't return for another family. It's all about the prevention side of it. And maybe it's because I've been in this business for so long that I'm willing to throw everything at the wall to make something stick. Really nothing negative to this program and going down this road with this. I'm sure that people can create 20 different negative reasons why they shouldn't do this, but are they really valid in? And you really got to ask yourself that question. It's obviously something your coroner's office is going to start this up. It's not something you want to drop on law enforcement out of the blue. It needs to be something that's discussed with all the agencies. We have multiple agencies here in Johnson County. So it's not something you want to just drop in without having that conversation first. But I can't think of a really valid reason why would not want to offer this program in the county, especially in the county.
And again, I just echo that. Take a chance. I'll be the first one to admit I was one of those skeptics. Oh my gosh, somebody else is coming in my scene. They're gonna, this is our duty as the coroner's office to provide these families with what we're elected and put into place to do. Educate your law enforcement. That's what we've been saying all along. Educate your law enforcement. This isn't a situation where these folks are going to come in and step on anybody's toes. There's They're not going to be rummaging through scenes or anything like that. They are there to assist the families. And I think a lot of coroners and death investigators in our state would be able to, function so much more freely at these scenes if they had somebody to just deal with the families at the time, because there is just a lot, like we said, going on at these scenes. So don't be afraid to color outside of the lines. Don't be afraid to take a chance. That's what we're here for. I think we have a lot of situations where people might not want to play in each other's sandbox. Don't be that coroner's office that is like that. I would implore everyone to at least show some interest, hear these folks out, hear what they have to say, and do what is best for your citizens in your counties in the state of Indiana.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add, either of you?
No, we put it all out there. Why we chose to go down this road with our company. You want to score some positive points for your coroner's office, especially when they're always in an uphill battle for our budgets, and validating our office as being a very important office in your county. These are the types of programs you put a feather in your hat when you bring on board, because the other elected officials control your budget or control other aspects of your office, and the general public. When they see you doing these types of things, that generates positive energy to support the coroner's office. And I know some of our coroner's offices, I see emails all the time that our coroner's offices are looked at secondhand. They're not that important. I'll argue that, and that's been down all day. And this is just one of those things that we can do to enhance your office, to bring attention to the positive to what we're doing. Giving back to the community, there's more than just answers on somebody.
Yeah, and I spoke at a conference last week, and it was one of those where I gave a lot of credit. Like, Atlas has done a lot of work. We put a lot of time in making sure our team was trained, that we had the right protocols in place, that we thought through all of these different things. But we were truly able to launch as fast and as well as we were because of your all support. I remember that first phone call way back when, Mike, and having that, here's what it does, here's what the benefits are, and your comment was, I'm in, what do you need? And that has made the world of a difference for us. So having those champions and elected officials is fantastic. And so we really appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I'm a yes man when it comes to good stuff.
I'm a fan of that. All for it.
And somebody else is better. I want to bring them into the team. Surround yourself with people who are good at what they do, and that's how you have a successful office. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate both of your time. And with that, I'm going to stop recording.